The definition could be different. So the legal is shit. Because at this point in time, it's time to discharge some shit. Okay? So I'm gonna give y'all just a little history. Not a whole lot. I don't keep y'all long. It's Friday, and I sure don't want to bore y'all. But I'm gonna make sure y'all have everything it is that y'all need to know. So the legal definition of discharge under banking, because we all know who've been in this for a minute, that depending on what title you're in, depending on if you're using a USC, a CFR, the definition could be different. So because we are dealing with the bank, we are going to be using banking terms. So the legal definition, the banking term, is debt discharge is the cancellation of a debt due to bankruptcy. When a debt is discharged, the debtor is no longer liable for the debt, and the lender is no longer allowed to make attempts to collect the debt. Due to the fact that the entire world has been up under bankruptcy since 1933, everything is supposed to be discharged. Technically, everything is discharged. The bank discharges every last one of our debts every single year. They do it quarterly, and then they have to turn in the previous year's forms by March the 31st of that next year. For example, all of the debt, car contracts, bills that you paid last year, they had to discharge that debt, filling out a 1099-C form through the Treasury Department by March the 31st. Unfortunately, because we have signed over fiduciary duties to the bank, if you look at any of your contracts, not only did it say you give them security interest, it also said that you can keep the proceeds. You don't believe me, pull one of your car contracts or pull your any contract. It will say that you gave them the option to keep the proceeds because you were not understanding or you didn't read it. We all know that they use different type of language on us to make it appear that we owe something that we truly don't. So everything is automatically discharged. Creditors cannot collect on discharged debts, period. It means that no one may make any attempt to collect a discharged debt from the debtors personally. For example, creditors cannot sue, garnish wages, assert a deficiency, that's your credit report where they're saying you're late, or otherwise try to collect from the debtor personally on any discharged debts. Creditors cannot contact you by the phone, mail, or on any otherwise in any attempt to collect the debt personally. Creditors who violate this order can be required to pay debtors damages and attorney fees. So for now, some of you that is on here that has been doing this for a minute, I know you're like, why is she saying the debtor and I am the creditor? We are the creditor. We are the creditor. We're the debtor. We're the beneficiary. We wear all of those hats. But in the same token, if the United States is responsible for all of the American people's debts, why do you want to be a creditor? Just ask yourself that. If they're responsible for all of the American people's debt, why do you want to be a creditor? There are certain circumstances that where we are creditors. During the times that we are our creditors, that is like if we're in court, when we're assigning the judge as fiduciary, okay? But when we're dealing with contracts, promissory notes, certificates of indebtedness, FRNs, AK floating rate notes, we are considered the debtor. So don't get confused, because I know you guys hear a lot. We are the creditor, and we are to an extent. In order for you to be able to understand how to move through their system, you need to understand what system they're operating out of. Everybody out of the Constitution, they rewrote the Constitution. The Constitution is not for us. Everyone uses the United States Code. I did at one point in time too. We're not up under the United States Code. We're not even up under the CFRs. We are up under the Emergency Banking Act of 1933. Hence, to why there's always some type of emergency going on, whether it's Ebola, whether it's coronavirus, whether it's the sky ain't green, blue today, whatever. They keep us up under emergency in order for us to continue to be able to use the FRN. The FRN is only for the Board of Governors, and we are not the Board of Governors. The Board of Governors have 7 people that sit on that board, and it is not any of us. So if y'all ever heard somebody say you're the Board of Governor, you're not. We are actually considered an enemy of the state because we are using FRNs, and lawfully we're not supposed to. So when you hear the enemy of the state, trading with the enemy act, that is why we are considered enemies of the state, because we are using FRNs and we are not securitizing the FRN. They have us calling it a Federal Reserve note because they say that on the top, and it is actually a floating rate note. We all know they like to play us with the terminology, with their wording, which is why it's so important to understand their terminology, their wording, so that you'll understand exactly what you're signing and what you're doing. So under the Emergency Banking Act, there are 5 titles that goes up under. If I was you guys, I would read it. I'm not going to read it to you. It would be a very good thing for you to read the Emergency Banking Act, because you need to know what game you're playing. You can't go to Uno with trump cards. You can't go to chess with checkers. So when you find out what game they're playing, you'll be able to join the game. This system was not created for us to beat it. You can't beat this system, but you can absolutely join it. There's nothing stopping us from joining it outside of a lack of knowledge, which I hope to give you guys today, and I hope you further it some after this call. So the Emergency Banking Act is where the authority was given to the comptroller. And if you guys notice, you got a comptroller of currency in every one of your states. We also have one up in Washington. It gave the Emergency Banking Act, gave the presidential authority through the banking crisis. There are 4 key players in this game, as I call it. You have us that sit at the head. You have the bank, which is the middleman, because the only way to get to the treasury is through the bank. Okay? So you got us, you got the bank, you got the treasury, you got the post office. For everybody that knows and don't know, the post office runs everything. The post office is the head of everything, because the post office is owned and ran by the Queen. I don't even know if any of you guys have noticed, they started doing mail on Sundays the last 3 weeks. Okay? Because the post office is owned by the Queen, that is why their money orders are non-negotiable, because they are the direct connect to the Treasury. So the Emergency Banking Act is very important for you guys to understand. There's 5 little titles on there. I touched on them briefly. As I stated, the Board of Governors, they are the ones who run the Federal Reserve. It is 7 of them. The Federal Reserve System is not the government. They are a private company, no different than Walmart. That's it. They are the only ones that are lawful. to be able to use Federal Reserve notes. Do anybody know that the national debt average, if I'm not mistaken, is $231 trillion right now? It's $231 trillion, but all of that money belonged to we the people. Every last dime of it. The reason why none of us have collected any of the national debt is because we are not using Wells Fargo, Chase, Navy Federal, whoever you bank with, you are not using them properly. The bank is not to deposit your money. The bank is to wire your securities to the Treasury to come back to you times 2. Okay. I'll reiterate again to why we are the enemy of the state. Only because the Board of Governors are allowed to use Federal Reserve notes. Federal Reserve notes are only supposed to be used during an emergency, which is why we're always in an emergency. And they try to keep it that way. So when I get to talking about the importance of terminology, we have to start using the proper terms. The green money in your pocket is an IOU that has no value. You're supposed to securitize it. You're supposed to take it to your bank and tell them to wire it to your TDA account, which we will go over how to get your Treasury Direct account. You are to use your Treasury Direct account in conjunction with your bank to wire your securities to the TDA, which is the Treasury. Once it goes through the Treasury then securitizes it. It has now protected your funds. For those that know about the CUSIP number, that is where the CUSIP number is developed at, through the Treasury. So if you do a transaction the proper way, let's just say it's your remittance coupon for your lights. You are to take it to the bank after you have opened up your Treasury account, and you are to say, hey, I need you to wire this to this account number. When you open up your Treasury account, it gives you wire instructions to take to your bank to wire your securities. When I tell you that they gave us everything that we needed, which is why the title that I had listed for this particular class said no more affidavits, because we don't need an affidavit when they created every form that we need. They created the process that we needed. They just failed to tell us. So when we get to talking about securities, a security is a financial security as a document of a certain monetary value. It refers to stocks and bonds, which are negotiable, and they're also